This morning I will be taking you through our Christmas series, Welcome Home, and we are on the second sermon, Make Room for Others. And this Friday, as I was writing the sermon, God reminds me a past story, things that He has done in our family in the past. That gives me a different perspective of reading the passage we read this morning. And before we talk about Welcome Home, I guess an important question is to ask, well, why? What is the reason we are returning home? Well, I presume after birth, our parents take us back to their house because that's where they live. So home is part of our beginning. So after work, you go home for rest. So our home is actually our charging dock. So after a walk, you might go home for a shower. So home is actually a place where we click refresh with water. And the question is, well, is your home comfortable? And I guess the answer lies in what makes you comfortable at home. For some people, it might be a big couch and massive TV, and that's all they need. For some others, it might be a meal on the table, because that is what they want. And for some other people, it might be simply someone at home expecting you to come, and that's all that can't. And mind you, that family member who is waiting for you could be your pet. It doesn't have to be your family member as well. You know, when you come through the door, they're wagging your tail, they're looking at you, want to jump on you. Maybe that was the moment you were after when you return home. And this is how the story begins tonight. The purpose of Luke writing down this part of the story is he wanted to place Jesus back in Bethlehem. Back in the city of David, because he wanted to show the audience Jesus is actually the newborn king. He wanted to make sure the audience understand Jesus fulfilled a prophecy in Micah. Now, this is what it says: Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are of old and from ancient times. So what Luke is is Jesus is indeed the king, the savior of Israel. He's trying to tell the audience he actually fulfilled the prophecy. And in the ancient time, the ancient literature tradition is if there is a prominent person, it is to do with the birth of a prominent person, whether it's a king or someone else, they want to make sure there are two things lining up. One is a prophecy, the other one is a sign that tells you this is the one you are waiting for. So I will talk about the sign later. But the first thing Luke wants to tell us is Jesus fulfilled the prophecy. He was born in Bethlehem. And as you read the story, there was a census happening in Bethlehem. Now, some people will say there is a good chance Joseph and Mary, they have a property there, and hence they have to go back. The way Luke explained is they belong to the house and the line of David. So the house here in Greek can also be translated to household. So belong to the family. There is a relationship there. That's what the reason they have to go back. And census in those days is very different from the census we have in our generation. You know, they are not quite interested in the demography in a suburb or in an area. They're not interested in knowing which household has got dependent child. They're not interested in knowing whether the household, how many people are working full-time alike. They're not interested in this. It's all about paying tax. So what they want to do is they want to find out who owns the land, who owns the properties, and how much is the property worth, and who is the owner, and hence the obliged taxpayer. So it's all about finding out how much tribute they can get from this province to the center, which is Roman Empire. So that's the sole purpose behind of doing the census. It's nothing to do with understanding the population, but it's a tax collection exercise, if you would like. So this is a journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem, about 135 kilometers. It is a hilly and very rough, rocky terrain. And in those days, people actually wear sandals. So if you're walking, good luck. So most of them, I guess, they will be using a donkey, particularly if you consider Mary would have been heavily pregnant at that time, so they will be riding a donkey. Still will be a bumpy ride. It won't be a comfortable ride. It will be a couple of days before they can actually get to Bethlehem. So that made me think about, well, there must be some kind of traction in the house that they really want to return. So if that is your home, you will make your way regardless how tough and how long is the journey. You got to go back, you will go back. For those who were born overseas, you will understand this. If you have to go back to your hometown, your homeland, doesn't really matter how long is the flight, doesn't really matter how many transitions and stopovers you have to do. If there is a reason you have to go home, you will go, because there's attraction there. And the attraction in the context of this story is relationship. He belongs to the household of David. So Joseph has got the lineage connected to David. There is a relationship there. As I think of, well, welcome home this year, our Christmas theme, what does it mean by welcome home? As a church, how can we create traction of our community that help people to return? Ask yourself this question. Do you feel in Christmas it's better to be here than in a shopping center? Now, as a church, I don't think we need to sell things at a discounted price to get people to the church, but relationships connects people together. And that's what it counts. In fact, when you look at First Peter, that's what it said. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gifts you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. As a community of love, how people connect to the church, how people find traction in the church, it actually rests on us as a loving community. Love brings about forgiveness and grace to people. Hospitality is very valued in the Jewish community and in the Romans world and in those days. It's actually, there's a lot of honor if someone opened their house to welcome people in. So hospitality, including board and lodging, actually, in those days. And what happened is when Joseph and Mary, when they go to Bethlehem, there are people there. They might be able to accommodate them, but they usually open their home and make room for people if that is a trustworthy traveler. So what does it mean is there's a very good chance when Mary and Joseph, they go to Bethlehem, the one who opened home is actually one of their relatives there. Because it's very dangerous on the road, they might have a chance opening doors for people who are very dangerous. So in other words, Mary and Joseph would have gone there and they would have been living in their relative's home. And this is what it said. Joseph went there to register with Mary, who was pleased to be married to him, was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. Now, if you remember the story we read last week, we talked about the shepherds. The angel appeared to the shepherds in the field and tell them, don't be afraid, I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger. So remember what I said, there are two things associated to any prominent birth. One is a prophecy. The other one is the sign. And we'll go back to the sign later. So clearly the angels is telling the shepherds, you have to pay attention. A newborn king is coming in Bethlehem. Now go back to the story. When Jesus was born, they were there looking for accommodation. They came from Nazareth, but there's no guest room there. Now, in those days, Bethlehem would not have been a tourist attraction. So what they are talking about, the accommodation, the inn, is not like a big RAC resort or a Big Four. It's not anything close to that. It's not a tourist attraction there. So, and people who live there in those days, mostly they have like a one-bedroom unit. So the household may sleep on a platform, on a raised platform, so that how they can separate from the stable. The stable is where the animal actually lives. So under the same roof, you've got the household and the animals, they live together. Now, some of the households, they might have a double-story home, so they might be living upstairs while the animal is sleeping on the ground floor. So that is the situation we are talking about. It's very unlikely, considering people in those days, they might be earning average and below average income. It's very unlikely the one who offer accommodation to Joseph and Mary has a mansion. It's probably unlikely they will offer a mansion to live in. It's very unlikely in that case. So what happened is the household, even though they're living in a small house, they make room for Joseph and Mary. And that's a very important message. Hospitality involves making room for people, making room for people to move in. And that's very important. And they obviously will have sent their own animals, either tie them outdoors for the night, which is dangerous because you've got people come and rob you, or they might send the animals to their neighbor's house so they can look after, so they can make room for Joseph and Mary at the end and the birth of Jesus. You know, some people are asking, well, we all believe God created heaven and earth, isn't it? And in the beginning, there is God who created heaven and earth. Someone asked the question, well, if there's nothing outside God when he created heaven and earth, so where would God create the earth then? Outside God, there's nothing. God is everything. It's the only existence in the beginning. So where will God find space to create heaven and earth? Now, some people say, well, God would have created space inside him to create heaven and earth, isn't it? Because outside of God, there is nothing. So where will he create heaven and earth then? Now, if you think of human pregnancy, how does human pregnancy come about? For a woman to create a space in her womb to accommodate a baby, that's love. Well, as I reflect of God's creation and how he created the world, I think of what God creates a space inside him to put the earth in it and create human beings. And then he put human beings on the earth to love and to flourish. That's how God showed love to us. He made room in itself so we can live there. Well, I think that's beautiful. God, who is the one in the beginning, right in the beginning, who made room for us so that we can live. You know, when you make room for people, you also try to provide them the best things you can get. Have you ever wondered why Jesus was placed in the manger? Have you ever wondered why the household hasn't got better things to offer when Jesus was born? Why can't they give him a cot or something? Why give him a manger instead? Now, some people look at the literature in the ancient world about gynecology and obstetrics. What they discover is there are recommendations how people should look after baby. So one thing is when the baby is born, they need to be swaddled in cloth to keep them warm, to keep their limbs straight. The second one is when you put them on a sleep surface, you need to build up the size or roll up the size if there is a mattress. The reason behind is if they are sleeping in a trainer-like bed, chances they roll off the bed is very slim. So that's why, in fact, putting a baby in manger is actually a recommendation if the household cannot find anything else. So what they are actually doing is the household make room in their small house to accommodate Joseph and Mary. But at the same time, they improvise. They find things so they can accommodate baby Jesus because they just don't have room and don't have the facility to accommodate a newborn. So they make things, they improvise things to accommodate baby Jesus. And I think that's amazing. They not only offer hospitality, but they also think what they can do to accommodate a newborn baby. And that applies to the context really well. Jesus was put in a manger, or assume it would have been cleaned to start with. It's a feeding trough. They must have cleaned it to accommodate baby Jesus there. And I think that's a beautiful picture. You know, God reminded me a story that we had. Well, about 14 years ago when our son was born, we were here by ourselves with our family. So we went to a church family who is very close to us. And the mom of the household is actually a midwife before she came to Australia. So we went there with our newborn. We stayed there for probably a week, if not 10 days, I can't really remember. So there we learned how to look after the baby, how to do shower, how to change nappies, what a wife's supposed to eat after birth, what we are supposed to eat, what should we do, etc. And then in their house, they don't have a cot because the cot is in our house. Finally, we will return home anyway. So we get a box to put our newborn in because we are fear the baby will roll off the bed. Of course, it's probably unlikely, but as a first-time parents, you thought, well, you fear of everything will happen. And then we thought, well, shall we co-sleep with the baby? Well, for the reasons of safety, we didn't do it. Or should we put it on the floor? That would be the easiest way to do it, but we think it's too risky. We might trip over, we might step on him. So we didn't do it at the end, so we put it in the box, and over the 10 days, we feel very secure. That shows you how the family think with us, think for us together to work something out for the baby. And you know, these days, from time to time, when we drive past their house, if we are closer to their suburb, we'll contact them to see if we can visit them. You know, for the sacrifices, for the things that they think for us in those days, we just think there is a second home that we can return. You know, what is the reward for accommodating people, making room for people, improvising things for people? You know, when we look at the Bible stories, Christmas after Christmas, there are two groups of people we will think about. First is the shepherds, second group is the Magi. We hardly ever think of the host family for Jesus Christ, isn't it? We hardly talk about this host family. In the day when houses are really, really small, they open their home, they make room for Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and they improvise things, whatever things they can find in the house, they accommodate. Who witnessed the birth of Jesus, who were involved in the early childhood of Jesus, other than the Magi and the shepherds, I think it is the household family. It is this host family who actually witnessed the birth of Jesus. Remember, I talked about the stable is under the same roof of the same house. There's a very good chance, I won't go as far to say they actually saw the birth, but I would probably be quite comfortable to say in the early celebration and in the early congratulations, in that moment, it's probably likely the household would have been there watching that. Well, if that is the case, they have seen the greatest news on the earth in their time, the birth of the Savior, the birth of Jesus Christ. They all have been expecting. And the family, because if they are the relatives of Joseph and Mary, they must be Jews. So they have been waiting for the Messiah, and yet God sent Jesus to Bethlehem, sent Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem. They opened home for them, and they become one of the first witnesses of Jesus Christ, the good news. How beautiful is that, you know? So what is the reason of returning home? You know, to welcome home this Christmas, we need to make room for others. And that space could be physical, could be a room in your house, could be somewhere in a church. You know, as a church, we tell people, hey, when you come to the church service, make sure you park as far as possible to make room for those people who has mobility challenges, to make room for the seniors, to make room for families who has got little kids because they need to park closer to the building. We ask people to sit forward in the front in the church building. So when people come late, if they are new, our guests, if they come, they are new, we won't feel the pressure to sit at the front, but they can sit at the back and be part of the service together. And you know, when someone come in, when the household come in, a group of 4 or 10 or something, you see them coming in, what will you do? You shift your chair, you shift your seat to give them the whole row so the whole family can sit together. Make room for people when they come to church. I think it speaks strongly what we're supposed to do these days as a church. So this Christmas, physical space, make room for people. Our mental space, be thoughtful. Thoughtfulness for people counts. Temporal space, make time for people. People come to the church, if you want to make them feel welcome to home, we need to give them the space. Mental, temporal, and physical. All this count. We make room for people. I'm sure God will reward you with the great news you can ever imagine.